is the title of this session. And although undeniably we did lose a big battle, I want to start by saying this: we have not failed. You and I are part of the biggest European movement in Europe, a movement that stretches all the way from the Highlands of Scotland to Gibraltar, and it isn't going anywhere. Now, we stand alongside not just the majority of UK citizens who wish to remain members of the European Union, but the majority of the electorate who rejected Johnson's Brexit on December the 12th. The values that we fought for in 2016 haven't changed, but the battle lines now have. We need to accept this and not only re-strategize to be effective in our fight, but we need to step it up to another level. We can't expect to be heard if we continue to politely ask to be listened to, and the so-called People's Government has no intention of taking our voice seriously, and they've ignored us this far. We must change course. We've got to learn from the indelible marks left by activists throughout history and continue to grow and develop our community. Now, putting aside whatever feelings you have about Dominic Cummings, he succeeded because he had an understanding of his audience which we were too occupied with trying to deny. He tailored his message to hit them with a campaign that he knew worked because he'd done it in 2016. 3 words repeated over and over and over. That's all it took. What's so frustratingly impressive about this is his audacity in employing that tactic twice. Take back control, 2016. Get Brexit done, 2019. And the results were exactly the same. Now, of course, despite this overarching reality, the full picture is a bit more complex than that, and it's that picture we're going to explore now. So if I just hand over to our first panellist, Dave Rowan from the Branches Forum of the European Movement. Dave.
Thank you, Ben. Good morning. I should say good afternoon now. I'm not going to talk about why we lost again. I think that's come out already very well in the first hour of this conference. The European movement has decided really that it wants to very rapidly move on to try and address the questions of what now, where next. So what we decided to do, quite a challenging time to do it, over the Christmas and New Year holiday, was run a very quick survey of our branch chairs. We have 125 branches around the country in the 4 nations. I think as many of those branch chairs as possible did try and talk to their committee members over that 3-week period. And we did get, I was quite pleased with the result that came back. I have to say, since that time, there has been another poll run by the staff at Millbank of the members, but I don't think that's going to be covered here today because the results of that are only just still coming in. Correct? Thank you. There were really 2 main kinds of question in the branch chair survey. Our political objectives, which I am going to talk about. The bit that I'm not going to talk about too much was really introspective. It was looking at the European movement, how we have worked and functioned since the referendum, as part of the People's Vote campaign, and what we need to do to improve ourselves in this year of transition and beyond. So I'm going to go through these very quickly because Ben wants to leave time for questions, and we're already running behind schedule. I haven't put any numbers on this, but this particular slide here asks that basic question: what do we think our priorities are in a single sentence, top 3 goals for 2020? And in descending order, starting right at the top, and we heard this from Will, promoting the EU, its values and its benefit. A lot of emphasis on values, who we are, what we stand for as British Europeans. Improving the European movement, obviously that relates to the introspection. Holding the government to account. Now, the first time I mentioned this to our chairman, Stephen Dorrell, he said, "Oh, that's not our job. That's the job of the opposition in Parliament." I don't think that washes with anybody in this room or in the breakout rooms or anybody that is a former Remainer. We want to call out this government for every promise they've made, for every promise that gets broken, for everything they've said that we know will not happen and will cost this country. We have yet to work out the mechanisms for doing this, but by God we're going to do it, aren't we? Yeah. Rejoining the EU, I'll come to that in just a moment, and maintaining and developing relationships with the EU. As far as we're concerned, you know, we are Europeans. We want to continue to work with the EU, with the 27, and we want to continue to build relationships for the future when that day comes, when we will rejoin. Question 6 in the survey came at this from a slightly different way, and it said, what are our priority issues? Issues really meaning things that we should potentially campaign on. And by far and away, right at the top here, and a lot of people feel very strongly about this, citizens' rights and citizenship. Yeah. Good. It's glad to know that this all feels exactly the same. I have to say, buried in this subject of citizenship, there is that notion that is supported by Guy Verhofstadt that we should be offered citizenship of the EU. I don't know the status of that at the moment, but it's on the cards. It's not gone away, it's still a possibility. But what we're really looking at here is to secure the rights of the 3 million EU citizens in this country, and we can already see that there are wobbles within the government versus what they've actually promised, and of course the rights of UK citizens on the continent. And the European movement, and I guess other groups represented here today, will join together to make sure that the rights of EU citizens in this country are secured, and that the government will not be allowed to break the promises it's made. I'm not going to go through the list. There isn't time. You can see in descending order what the priority issues are. Alignment, that's been mentioned. Will talked about, or Richard did right at the beginning, about already we've had backtracking from Sajid Javid about alignment, not alignment. We will call out the cost of non-alignment as we go through transition. Democracy, I'll just make one comment about democracy. We all feel that we have been let down by democratic institutions in this country. I don't feel that we live in a democracy, quite honestly. No. And when we know that 54... A lot of it is to do with our corrupt first-past-the-post parliamentary system. Many of you would like to vote to change that system. Whether we're going to get this government to listen is another matter. But I think if anything's called this out, and needed calling out, then the last 3 years have really put this on the agenda for the future. And it won't go away. Holding the government to account, I've already mentioned. I'm not going to go through all the rest. You can see them. 2 key questions. Should we lobby for a soft Brexit? Now, this has been backwards and forwards over the last 3 years between different groups. The European movement has always been unequivocal that our aim was to stop Brexit. No surprise, therefore, that from our branch chairs there was a majority saying, no, we will not lobby for soft Brexit. We always wanted no Brexit, and that's still basically the situation, even though we can't now lobby for a soft Brexit. But, you know, all we're really saying here, I think, is if Johnson gets a deal that is tantamount to a soft Brexit, we will not be cheering from the rafters, not by any means. Should we take an early position about lobbying to extend the transition period? Boris has said he's not going to do this. A lot of people felt that we should take that position because we believe that by the end of 2020, if he holds to that, we are going to get such a rubbish deal. Now, some people say, well, bring it on, okay? We need to prove that Brexit was a terrible idea, and this might be the way of doing it. And I think here we're I feel somewhat conflicted. Do I want to see damage done to my country consciously, or do I want to prove that Brexit was that bad idea? We will see. And then the thorny question of rejoining, right? There are different views about this. Majority of EM branch chairs said, yes, we should campaign to rejoin, but not now. And I'm of that view that we should certainly wait to go through 2020. We should monitor how transition works. We should see what kind of deal we get. And I think it will be a self-building case to prove that this was a bad idea and we should rejoin. If you go out talking to the Leave community now about rejoining, they will just laugh in your face. And I believe they will just tell us, look, you just lost for the second time what we believe was a democratic vote. So this is not the time, but we can build that unequivocal case to rejoin in future years. Arising from that survey, we've got some political objectives, speak for themselves really, identify, expose, publicise the adverse consequences, champion our British-European identity, very much what we're doing here today, welcome and support citizens from other European countries, that's our campaign to protect the rights of EU citizens here, champion closest possible alignment between UK and economies, despite what our politicians say. Will has already mentioned what the cost of non-aligning will be. Demand the rights, living standards and prospects enjoyed by British citizens are at least equal with our counterparts on the continent. Well, I don't personally think that's going to happen in the short, medium term, unless we've all been wrong for the last 3 years, but it's an aspiration. Courage to facilitate greater understanding of the UK's historic, present and future. This really, I think, comes down to the education. And I think the European movement has always seen itself as an organisation that will inform and educate about Europe. And that's something I think strongly should be on our agenda. And at a future date, and as said, based on the light of progress in achieving all those objectives and what actually happens, to campaign to rejoin. And then lastly, internal to the European movement, we want to grow our membership. Obviously we do, with an emphasis on the younger generation. There are criticisms of the European movement that it is somewhat staid, it is male, it is white, and it needs to attract a younger generation to come and join with us in promoting those European values. Develop the EM network regionally, nationally, regionally and locally. Create the spider's web, if you like, of branches, groups across the country. Give thoughtful consideration to alliances and partnerships. We all know in this room that some aspects of that did go badly wrong during the summer and autumn in the People's Vote campaign. We learned lessons from that and we will not allow that to happen in the future, any of us, and the EM's got to do its bit in that. Identify near-term focus campaigns such as championing citizens' rights and listen and involve the grassroots, our members and supporters. And that's why the EM is here today, and I think there are many amongst the 450 people here that are EM members or supporters, and we're with you and all of this all the way. And
we've done several research studies for the pro-EU campaigns. And at the end of last year, we thought, okay, it's about time for another one. At the time, we didn't know the European Movement Plan was going. But we decided to survey pro-EU groups across the country from multiple campaigning organisations. And what we wanted to find out was actually what went wrong with the general election from our activists and our volunteers. What do volunteers want to do next? What were their ambitions, locally and nationally? So you can see we had a fantastic response. To be honest, that was in 10 days. So this demonstrates to me the high engagement around the country for taking action and letting their voices heard. So on the left-hand side, you see the chart, multiple committee members. We also had a really good breadth of general volunteers. And then there were the others. Now those were quite interesting. You had to look at the comments to understand who were they. They were the people that donated, wrote letters, actually joined our rallies, came on the marches, but didn't perceive themselves as volunteers. Okay? On the right-hand side, This is an interesting chart too. A couple of takeaways. Good coverage across all of the different campaigning organisations. Secondly, multiple of them. I mean, look at that. Now we've done this, I think this is our 4th survey, and in every single one, it mentioned the fact we had too many groups, too many messages, too many different approaches. Not one clear leader with a message like they had, all right? So this speaks to the challenge. And then the last point I want to take your focus to is the independents at the bottom there, okay? So who were they? They were actually a political party, members of a political party, the Lib Dems, the Labour, the Greens. There was one man that said, I'm a silent observer, right? So you know out there we've got a bigger network who are behind this pro-EU campaign. And we've seen this now, haven't we, with the previous presentations. So it's really key that we keep growing or keep engaging with the wider community that we're in. Okay. So what went wrong? Well, this is a very complex issue, and we've seen with Henry already some data around that. But what went wrong for us is we're focused on the top 3 pieces. The number 1, many pro-EU supporters would never vote for Corbyn, would they? And that resonates for all of us. Such a fickle approach to Europe, there was no way that that confidence could be there. The second thing was tribal politics. I mean, I was gutted when the Lib Dems and the Labour would not give away on those key seats. And I didn't actually realise enough the implications of that. I just kept on going out on the streets, campaigning on stores. But then you see what happened. It was so tribal. And the final thing, which I think we can all resonate with, was Brexit fatigue. You know, the slogan, get it done. If you're tired of it, if you're sick of hearing it on the news, if you're sick of having arguments in your families, if you're sick of the whole thing, you just want to get it done. And you don't care a damn about the implications because it's too complicated. You know, even for me, that has been in this for 3.5 years, it's too complicated for me, and I live and breathe it, so that every person on the street would find it challenging. So that was the 3rd takeaway. In terms of, okay, one last key point, positive message. All right? So all our messages were around fear. So the 4th one, as you can see, was not a positive, clear message for Europe. Okay? And also, the messages were complicated. We didn't have slogans. We didn't have snazzy things that we could say in the way that the Leave campaign did. So that was another one. But the good point, look at this chart. Wow! Actually, just under 75% want to continue campaigning. That is absolutely key. And then there's those people in the middle that don't know. Well done. There's the people in that 25% they don't know. But you know, if you think about it, if you've been in your groups and you've met together as your teams, you can understand they're tired. They're really devastated. They don't know whether they can give their hearts to this again. So actually that's a really important group as well, you know. Also about timing for pro-EU rejoining campaign, there were 2 different mindsets. One mindset said, yes, let's go for it now. The other mindset said, no, be patient. Wait for them to make their mistakes. We can't afford to be blamed for their mistakes. So there was actually those 2 paradigms there, And we need to be bigger to be able to take those paradigms and work with them. It's really key. All right, national campaigns. We've got 3 key points, and they're actually followed with David. Hold government to account. Really top one there. We have a real challenge as to how we're going to do that. Second, electoral reform. You know, that has bubbled up as a key thing. A lot of the comments in the survey were around electoral reform. UK retaining closest relationship with Europe. But look at those other 3 under there. Rejoin, defend EU citizens' rights, and develop stronger links. So there's a lot of us that want to carry on with the EU, European initiative that we started whenever we did. Okay. In terms of now, in terms of local support, there's 3 key points again, and these mirror the national requirements. Track the impact of Brexit on the local community. How do we do that? If we want to do it, we've got to start doing it now. And Tony Powell, who was working with me on this, he's over there, he wants to start an initiative of this type. He needs support to do that and interest to do that. So tracking the impact of Brexit in our local communities. Is that important? Local reorganisation. We've got to repurpose our teams. We're no longer fit for purpose around a people's vote or the Remain activity. So we need to continue networking, develop and refine our purpose, our vision. We need to protect those key resources we have, whether it's talking about volunteers, whether it's the expertise, getting to know your communities. We did that over the last 3 years, didn't we? So we need to protect those resources that we've got and decide how we move forward. And that final comment, people are exhausted, but we don't want to lose them. So how do we do that? I believe we have to keep close contact and communication with them. So our key takeaways, significant amount of interest in continuing to campaign, holding government account, that's consistent with what we've seen with the other pieces of research, electoral reform, EU initiatives, and there are obviously breakout groups going on right now around those topics. Addressing fake news. Now this was not on our survey, but it bubbled up with the comments. And actually, you know, whether it was talking about far-right press, the control of that press, whether it was talking about the regulations around advertising standards for the elections, there's a mass of interest there. I want to be involved. I cannot stand the fact that the regulations around social media are not there, and we're in a poor shape legally.
Caroline, thank you very, very much, Caroline.
Firstly, with the notion of how did we lose again, let us be absolutely clear that this was not a referendum, this was a general election that 2 parties decided to walk into very ill-advisedly, and that had a whole set of problems associated with it. And all the work that we had been doing as a community was then taken from our hearts and put in the hands of people who run those parties, because in the general election, you're asking people to vote for a party, so their leaders, their messaging, their infrastructures is what dominated. And as you've heard before, including that excellent presentation from Henry, even if you have 53 versus 47%, they only needed 43 or 44 from the Brexiteer end in order to carry it. And that's precisely what happened. Then, with tactical voting, it's only got efficiency with those people who are prepared to swap around their votes. And then finally, as Henry also pointed out, when you've got first past the post and you're doing it constituency by constituency, you have the Trump effect, whereby you could win the popular vote, but because of the structure of where our votes cluster, you've got lots and lots and lots of other smaller constituencies that can win by a small margin, and thereby they win on the structure of the thing rather than by popular vote. So I want to talk about briefly how I think there was failure on the part of Lib Dems, briefly how there was failure on the part of the Labour Party, but then we have to also talk about the People's Vote campaign and have that brutal self-reflection now, because now is the appropriate time for it, not before, now, and think about how we want to build from that. With the Lib Dems, they had a huge opportunity after the European elections when they were on a surge, like the Brexit Party, and were pulling in politicians from Labour and also from the Conservatives. That was the time where they should have redefined themselves in order to go after the rural Remainer Conservative votes, talking about countryside issues, green issues there, security, stability, sensible economics, that kind of stuff. They went diving for the revoke line in order to try and see off Labour, and were trying to fight Labour for the same votes. Labour, and also that revoke line, spooks the part of the population that they should have been going for. Labour had to hold on to its youth demographic and its inner city demographic, but at the same time hold on to Workington man. Now, for all the times that we've been lectured about that northern vote and the working class vote, if you look at their manifesto, what did it offer to the older voters in those regions? Grind for Corbyn, free universities and free broadband doesn't cut it there. And more importantly, they should have seen it coming, that they would have to come off the fence. And if you're going to come off the fence, you sure as hell prepare the side of the fence that you're going to land on. So they in a mealy-mouthed way shifted to our side of things and then did zero work in all of those constituencies where they should have been working hard, and we should have as well, working with those communities that we needed to turn around saying, this is what it means to your lives, this is why your loyalty and your identity should be bound in community, local, national and international, for your protection. That's what it should have been. But we are where we are on those two. They didn't work together. They didn't have the simple line of just put it to the vote. Hopefully in future they will now see that proportional representation is the way to go. But we need to look at what happened with ourselves in the People's Vote campaign, because we built up support, we pushed the parties into this line, we won the parliamentary battles up to a certain point, we got it to the cusp, but we didn't actually have the backs of those parliamentarians covered on the ground with good on-the-ground structure and with good persuasion campaigns to win over the demographics that we needed to win over. For me, that was a long-standing sore and a problem, because I was there when the Britain Stronger in Europe campaign was but a twinkle in David Sainsbury's eye. I saw how it formed, I saw how it was controlled by David Cameron's clique, and I saw that as it grew and was determined that it and it alone needed to run the media message, then a whole load of grassroots campaigns that started up at the time were outright asphyxiated. And that meant that for scientists, you didn't have scientists talking to scientists and acknowledged as such, or NHS workers talking to NHS workers, or farmers talking to farmers. It was all, farmers agree that Britain is stronger in Europe because here's our Britain Stronger in Europe spokesperson saying so. And it wasn't genuine, and it wasn't earthy, and it wasn't bound into that world that was real for people. So I was very frustrated during the 2016 referendum about that. But after that was lost, what you actually saw is you saw a blooming of the groups, particularly the local groups regionally, that wanted to stand up in reaction to that. And slowly, and this now is going much faster, but slowly we coalesced over time. We developed this philosophy of working together, and then with the People's Vote campaign, the idea was we're still not getting cut through yet. We still don't have enough critical mass in order to raise the big funds, in order to get BBC cut through. That was a critical issue at the time, and in order to have enough co-working whereby we could exchange ideas. This is what the launch of the People's Vote campaign, an overt umbrella of many organisations, solved. However, and we must be blunt now about the things that have bothered us over this time. For me personally, what bothered me is that the money and the data and the control funneled very quickly into Open Britain, which started to guard it very jealously. And that is something that you just live with for a while, because essentially we were on a wing and a prayer and trying to influence parliamentarians to take us in the right direction. But that actually meant a lot of starving out of secondary campaigns that became increasingly suspicious about working with PV, and also for a lot of local campaigns, they were getting frustrated that they weren't being invested in. And I remember by the end of 2018, lots of local groups saying, we've collected all these emails for PVHQ, where are those emails for us locally so that we can talk to those people and organise them? We know they're collecting a whole load of money, but we need investment here to set up structures, otherwise we're living in a wasteland and nothing is going to happen here. And that is something that built up over time, and by the European elections, a lot of political dynamics were changing, and it was at that point that we really needed a robust and local, grassroots-led Remain campaign to complement the central work of PV that was working on parliamentarians. That's what we needed at that stage, and through top-down organisations and various jealousies within it, it just started turning into an internal combustion rather than sensible work share. I had always envisaged that if I was going to have a slide, it would just be a triangle like this, and say we needed to turn the triangle upside down because we needed our direction to be informed by all those grassroots campaigns that had been at the bottom, with a central entity saying, how can we help you, how can we help you, what do we need, how do we build it all up? And that goes for everything from a messaging playbook to financial investment to all the technological structures that people needed. So that is what I attempted to do to a limited degree from the beginning of 2019, when I saw that this thing was probably going to maybe implode centrally, but the grassroots were the future, and that was raising that money to invest in all of the Facebook local groups to grow it from 100,000 followers to collectively over 600,000 followers. Incidentally, since the general election, it is still growing. And that is what we need to be building on now, because that's what resonates with people. Like Henry was saying before, it's about family, friends, people in your workplace, people you know. That's what people listen to, not the blanket wall of the media poured down and hoping that there's going to be a trickle down. So this is what we need to build upon now. The only thing I would disagree with what Henry said is that, you know, we would have won it if it had been a referendum. I'm not so sure, because I think we didn't actually have enough infrastructure in place and tested messaging in place that was redolent to those key demographics that we need to be working on now. But now, we've got that 5-year game plan that we need to drive in parallel with the Greens, the Lib Dems, Labour Party, and most importantly, our communities. We need to become masters of understanding our communities' issues and our communities' politics. We embed there with our news, with our hearts, with our values, with our understandings of how all of these granular local environments around this country tick. And because we've got national organisations, we can bring that together and make that cohesive and drive a deep plan from here that is not top down, but is bottom up from all of the understandings that we have been working so hard to build. And we'll take forward. Thank you.